What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. We're live. We're live on YouTube. What's going on, everybody? I hope everyone's doing well. There's a lot of waiver wire talk this week that we got to do. There's a lot of running back injuries, a lot of running backs we can actually pick up on the waiver wire and start in week 5. So, this is kind of, I don't want to say this is what we've been waiting for. We're not waiting for any injuries,
We've been
but
waiting for the
the
injuries
waiver
to
wire
pile
has
up.
been the waiver wire has been a little weak.
Yeah,
Over the past, few weeks. We got a couple of wide receivers here and there, like, Curtis Samuel in week 1,
Romeo Dubs. Yeah,
Romeo Dubs. If you picked up Tyler Higbee
yeah.
after week 1 or week 2, you're looking like, how many targets did he have last night? Like 12, 13 targets?
I think he has him registered at 14.
14 targets through 5 weeks. I'm sorry, through 4 weeks. The dude is leading all tight ends in targets, and he is the tight end 5 on the season behind Kelsey, Andrews, Hockenson, and Ertz. He's an every week start at this point. But let's get into a little bit of news. Jonathan Taylor, he didn't practice, but there is a chance that he plays this week. If he doesn't go, are you taking a shot, with any of these Colts running backs outside of Nyheim Hines?
I'm not really. And it just comes down because the Colts offense, even with Jonathan Taylor in, has not been very good at all. And that I think it comes down to Matt Ryan. I mean, I know they have been protecting him, but Matt Ryan hasn't been what we wanted him to be. We thought maybe behind a slightly better offensive line in Indianapolis, he'd be able to perform a little bit, but that hasn't been the case. He's been a turnover machine. And because he's a turnover machine, the Colts offense really hasn't been on the field that much, and they're often in negative game script, so not handing the ball off. They're usually throwing it. Morale Cox got the beneficiary of that last week. He showed up pretty big. But I'm not taking any shots and like hoping for the best. I mean, maybe Nyheim Hines, like you said, he'll be there. He might be in for a bit of an increased workload. I'm not seeing him doing much better than Taylor has this season. It's not like he's going to step in and be a big difference maker. I'm just kind of taking my hands off right now if I'm looking for a running back on the waiver wire. I think there are plenty of better options.
Do you think that there are plenty of better options than Nyheim Hines if Jonathan Taylor were to miss, though? Because I feel like out of all the options that we're going to talk about in week 5, I think I'd rather start, if let's say JT misses, right? I think I'd rather start, Nyheim Hines over a lot of the guys, that we have. And just to give a little bit of a preview, I think Raheem Mostert, obviously, I think I'd rather play Raheem Mostert most likely. But outside of that, Tyler Algier, Mike Boone, Caleb Huntley, these guys, Latavius Murray, it's a little bit of a crapshoot in terms of like what their workload is going to look like. So I guess, especially if it's a 1 week play, I think Nyheim Hines, most likely will be on the field more than 50% of snaps, maybe 60% of snaps, right? And I can see him being a little bit more involved, in the pass game as well. Running a bunch of routes, getting some targets, so I can see him putting up an RB2 type of week with a little bit of upside.
That's fine. I guess if you're talking about for like this week only.
This week only. Yeah.
I'm looking at, Tyler Algier. His matchup this week is pretty bad. He's playing the Bucs. Other guys that we had on the wire. Who else did we have there at running back? There's someone else. Mike Boone.
Mike Boone.
It is the Colts defense, but we still don't know. Melvin Gordon might still be getting the majority of the looks. We have to see how that plays out. But we kind of tagged Mike Boone as a guy that could see actually a pretty decent workload because of Melvin Gordon's recent fumbling issues and just trouble protecting the ball in general.
Yeah, no, I hear that. All right, before we get into the waivers officially, let's just go over the game last night. We talked about Tyler Higbee. He looks like he's the number 2 target in LA. Let's take the L on Allen Robinson right now. I should have been took it. Jesus, are you cutting Allen Robinson right now? Like we said that you can't start him this week, right? Like he was on our bench going into week 4. Are we cutting dead weight? Is that what we're doing with Allen Robinson?
Yeah, I don't want to. I don't want to cut him. I'm still holding on. So it's one thing if he didn't get any targets, but he actually got a relatively decent amount of targets for what we've seen him do this season. He had 6 targets last night. So it wasn't that bad, but it's not good, obviously. I'm still leaving him on the bench at this point, but I don't think he's a cut candidate just yet. One more bad week, then I think we could talk about maybe just cutting them outright. But as things stand right now, the Rams offense still is in a funk. And it looked all right the past 2 weeks, but it's just, the 2 weeks before, obviously last night. But I think the Rams offense still has a ways to go yet. I don't know if they're ever going to get back to that. Maybe Odell Beckham was the catalyst for a good offense, but that clearly wasn't the case last season because they added him partway through the season. I want to see more from the Rams offense, and I think that Allen Robinson, I'm going to keep him just in case things turn on a dime.
He has 3 games so far out of 4 with 2 catches or less. His one good game, 4 for 53 and a touchdown, almost 2 touchdowns in that game. This week, he might see Trayvon Diggs. He gets Carolina in week 6 and then a bye, right?
Yeah.
So there's a chance that he's sitting on your bench next week, the week after, and the week after that. Well, the week after that, you're definitely putting him on your bench because he has a bye week.
Yeah.
And do you want to keep him for that long? I say that if you need to cut him, cut him. And if you can afford it, leave him on your bench.
Yeah.
Cooper Kupp, 17 targets. Obviously, we nothing surprising there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tyler Higbee, 14 targets as well. We talked about that. He's somebody that you got to keep in your lineup at this point every single week. He is a solid tight end 1, leading all tight ends in targets. Who would have saw that coming? Tyler Higbee versus Allen Robinson. Who's getting more targets this year? It's looking like Higbee is gonna, do his thing. I saw a tweet yesterday that through the first drive of yesterday's game, Tyler Higbee has already outscored Kyle Pitts.
Yeah,
on the week.
Dude,
it's unfortunately true.
He had, I think it was 3 catches on the first drive.
Yeah,
and granted, it wasn't for much yardage, but
he's very involved though, man.
Yeah, he is 100%. The thing is, he's not terribly efficient. He's not like this talent that's going to go crazy with that volume. Obviously, because he's had this type of volume a couple of weeks and he hasn't really like exploded. But imagine Kyle Pitts with this volume. How awesome would that be? It's too bad.
It's only a dream, man. It's only a dream. It's only a dream. I don't think it's, right now we talked about Kyle Pitts the other day. Like it's just not going to happen right now. It's not going to happen. I mean, Tyler Higbee on his, 1.71 yards per route run. That's not bad. It's, Darren Waller right now, at 1.29, but Kyle Pitts at right above him at 1.72. You know why? His yards per route run is so high? Because he ain't running no damn routes.
Right.
That's why.
Yeah.
That's why. All
Divide
right,
by 0 error.
Anyway, I can't talk about Kyle Pitts anymore. I'm gonna get too emotional. Start sweating over here. Darrell Henderson, he ended up out snapping Cam Akers last night. He played 60% of the snaps. Akers got the short yardage stuff. But Darrell Henderson got all of the passing down work, including the third down and 2-minute snaps. Actually, I'm looking over here. Actually, Darrell Henderson got the short yardage stuff. So not ideal. This backfield can go back and forth every single week. But, Henderson is in a situation now where it's like, all right, well, you can plug him in and hope for something. Whereas, you're not going to know what's going to happen, depending on the game script. But Darrell Henderson isn't useless. You can throw him in your lineup, and hope for the best because he could get some goal line work. He could get some work in the pass game. But this backfield is not ideal. It's going to be back and forth. This is like with the worst type of committee.
Yeah, no, it really is.
Because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, 100%. And we talked about maybe Cam Akers being the guy, and then suddenly after week 1 is Darrell Henderson's the guy. And we're just hoping that leans one way so we're not sitting here guessing every week, and that's what we're getting. We're just going to sit here.
Pretty much.
Who is it going to be this week? This week it was Darrell Henderson, but it's not looking like the ceiling is awfully high, regardless of who gets the majority of the touches. So I'm kind of, hands off. Darrell Henderson's my pick too. If you're going to play one of them, I'd pick Darrell Henderson at this point because he seems to have more consistent quality workload. Akers just didn't look very good running the ball last night either, but it was, like I said, just a rough showing for the Rams overall on offense.
Jeff Wilson continued where he left off. He's been a solid fill-in at your RB2 spot. Nothing too crazy, right? Around 12 PPR points over the last 3 weeks, just staying right around that spot in relief of Elijah Mitchell. That would put him at the RB20 over the last 3 weeks. So RB20, solid RB2.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and get right into the waiver wire, man. Anything else that stood out to you last night, or was that pretty much it?
George Kittle had a quiet night, which was kind of disappointing. That's one of my takeaways there because we know what he can be. They weren't, they didn't have to push the ball downfield. They didn't have to utilize, I don't think, their full arsenal. Deebo Samuel, when he takes the offense and puts it on his back, runs through 5-6 Rams defenders, including Jalen Ramsey for a touchdown. It's tough to get any scoring done as a tight end because Deebo Samuel's going off last night.
I hear that, man. I hear that. It is disappointing. I think I'm going to keep Kittle in my lineup next week, see what happens, and it's going to be a Kyle Pitts type of situation. If he doesn't do his thing, then I'm gonna end up benching him, and it's unfortunate because he's such a good talent. Maybe he's still a little bit banged up, but we're looking to see some more targets out of him. George Pickens, I have here at number 1. He is available in about 50% of leagues. If he is available, I think he has the most upside out of anybody that you're going to be able to grab on waivers. I think Pickens has the most upside out of this list, and then I had Rachaad White here at number 6. He has the second most upside, I think, out of anybody on this list. And the reason why is because if Leonard Fournette were to get hurt, Rachaad White, would step in and be an every down back for Tom Brady and that Bucs offense. And we'll get to him, but he did play a little bit last week, and he played, relatively early in that game, despite him losing that fumble very early on special teams. He's still got some work, on offense with Leonard Fournette not playing so well.
Right.
But we'll get there. George Pickens, he simply has the most upside of these guys, right? Like all these guys, and that's what I'm shooting for. If I don't care if I'm grabbing a running back or a wide receiver, and like I don't necessarily need anybody to plug in next week, you can plug him in too. 30% target share in week 4, 22% target share in week 3. There's a quarterback change as well, right? There's a lot of reasons to have hope for Pickens, and the hope is that Kenny Pickens. I'm going to get this wrong all year long.
Kenny Pickens and George Pickett
can come in. I think he can come in and unleash that talent for these wide receivers potentially, right?
Yeah.
Including Deontay Johnson as well, who's been solid in PPR. Like he's at a high floor, but only the wide receiver 24 coming into week 3. We know that he has wide receiver 1 type of upside, but his ceiling has been capped, right? And if he's available in your if Pickens is available in your league, I think I'm dropping, decent amount of fab, maybe 15-20%. Does that sound about right? Or you going more or less?
I think 15 is where I kind of cap out. I would bet on the guys in your league kind of taking, a less optimistic view because, we saw Kenny Pickett. Obviously, he was good on the ground. Through the air, he threw 3 picks. Granted, they weren't all his fault. He is a rookie quarterback on a bad offense. So I'd take advantage. Maybe some people might not be that tuned in to the idea of George Pickens being a waiver wire pickup this week. I would maybe tone it down, maybe 15. If you think the upside's there, which it could be, and I agree, I like George Pickens, especially with Kenny Pickett at quarterback, but you could shoot for the 20. I'm kind of capping out at 15, though.
Now, let me ask you this. Is Pickens too high here at number 1? And let me just go over who I have the rest of the way. I have Pickens at number 1, Raheem Mostert at number 2, Tyler Algier at number 3, Mike Boone at number 4, Michael Gallup at number 5, followed by Rachaad White, Caleb Huntley, Isaiah McKenzie, Zay Jones, and Rondale Moore. Is there anybody, in that maybe top 5 that you rather pick up over George Pickens?
No, not really. I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think that he's too high. I just think that 20% of my budget is a little bit pricey for me for a receiver. We know he has the talent, but he's still on a bad offense, like I said. And Kenny Pickett, these rookie quarterbacks tend to come in and flash in their first start. Especially when they come in halfway through the game. But then things can get a little dicey down the stretch if they start a few games down the line. So I'm going to kind of. I'm not taking the under, but I'm not taking the over either. I'm just going to kind of sit right in the middle. Like I said, 15. I might throw 15 at him if I'm going for a receiver in George Pickens. He does have upside though to be a solid wide receiver for you with Kenny Pickett there.
Yeah, I think so. And we saw what he's capable of in the preseason. We saw Pickett finding George Pickens in the end zone, in the preseason. And I think they're going to have a little bit of rapport in the second half of that game. When Pickett came in, he was targeting Pickens a ton. So that's good to see. Raheem Mostert, I have him at number 2. Don't forget about Thursday night. He dominated usage in passing situations. He played on 72% of snaps. This is a good offense. Obviously this week they're going to have Teddy Bridgewater, but once Tua is back, this offense should start to roll once again. And I think you want pieces of this offense if they're available. And listen, maybe this goes back and forth between Mostert and Edmonds, but I'd take the shot, given a couple of weeks of Mostert having the upper hand here.
Mostert has the upper hand. It fits
the
theme of the podcast 100%. I think Mostert's a good pickup. I don't know if I'd put him over Tyler Algier at this point. I guess maybe if you're thinking for immediately this week, maybe I'd take Raheem Mostert over Tyler Algier. But I like Tyler Algier longer term with Cordero Patterson on the short-term IR. Raheem Mostert, I think that he's still liable to lose some work to Chase Edmonds, and that's going to come in the passing game. I don't think his ceiling is that high. I don't think it's as high as Tyler Algier. I get it though because this is a good offense, and we've seen Raheem Mostert. He kind of looked like the Raheem Mostert that we saw back in San Fran, especially after the first 2 weeks where Raheem Mostert wasn't doing very much. It's nice to see him doing that. You might have got a few people that drafted him or picked him up. They might have dropped him after those first 2 weeks. If he's sitting there on the wire, you could take him 100%. But I don't think he's going to have incredible upside. Not that Tyler Algier is going to have much incredible upside either, but I think Tyler Algier has a bit more upside than Mostert.
Yeah, if I need a back for this week, I'm actually starting Tyler Algier over Raheem Mostert because I don't know what that backfield is going to look like in Miami. So I'm grabbing Mostert as like a prospective ad. If I need to throw him in the lineup, I will. But it could, like you said, it could go back and forth. However, for the long term, if Raheem Mostert is that guy, and I see that he's that guy, I have a pretty good asset on my hands for the rest of the season, right? With Tyler Algier, if when Cordell Patterson comes back, after 4 weeks, it's possible that this backfield is kind of handed back to Patterson, and Algier is either borderline startable or not startable. So that's kind of, I'm taking my shot on somebody who might have, value all season long. Now, it is possible. Moving on to Tyler Algier, number 3, it is possible that this run game is annoying even without Cordell Patterson, right? In terms of not knowing who the guy is any given week, Algier and Caleb Huntley ended up splitting time on Sunday. Algier did end up outsnapping Huntley 44% to 29%. He ran way more routes than Huntley. He was their passing down guy. But Huntley ended up getting most of the goal line snaps and ended up with that goal line touchdown. So, it's like, all right, well, I hope Algier can get some goal line touchdowns, right? And I had to choose between these two guys, and I was going back and forth, but I think I prefer going with the guy who is getting more snaps and passing down work, because the goal line stuff might flip, right? That might flip. It has a chance to flip. Algier, he looked really good on the ground. And by the way, this offensive line is really good. They're creating a ton of holes, and I really liked Algier coming out of BYU a lot more than other people. We talked about this with our rookie draft kit. You'll see that Algier is pretty highly rated, compared to other, how other people viewed him. But Algier was legit at the goal line in college. He led all FBS schools with 23 rushing touchdowns last year. He has it in him. So I do lean Algier. I think that could potentially flip. Now, I think Huntley is worth picking up too. I have him here at number 7, and because he looked good as well. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And we talked about this a potential bad matchup against New Orleans. Right, that's who they're going up against. Oh, they're going up against
the Bucs, yeah.
But if you look at like the Bucs, what they're doing this year, they're not as stout as they were these past few years. And it's like, looking at what these other running backs were able to do against the Bucs, like I'm not really scared about it, especially given the fact that Atlanta's offensive line, especially in the run game, they've been legit. So I think Atlanta's offensive line is actually going to win this battle against Tampa Bay. So I'm not necessarily staying away from Tyler Algier this week. So. Now, by the way, don't forget about Damian Williams. And I do have him at, somewhere in the teens here as a pickup. Yeah, at 15. He was the original starter, okay? They put him on ice through the entire preseason, because he was their starter. It's not like he had a lower body injury or anything like that. It was a rib injury. So when he comes back, I expect him to be ready to go if they need him. So he started the season ahead of Cordell Patterson before he got hurt. So, can't forget about him. So if you're looking more long-term past this week, he's on IR for 1 more week. So he's eligible to return in week 6. You might want to consider Damian Williams over Huntley, right? That's a possibility. You know what I'm saying? I think I prefer to grab Algier. A lot of people forgetting about Damian Williams. They're going to grab Huntley, and you might be able to get, Damian Williams for like $1. You know what I mean? Because people forgot about him, and not that many people knew that he had those first few snaps and first few runs early on in the season before he got hurt and had that rib injury. So it's a very interesting situation in Atlanta. There's a lot to digest there, but that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, and that's our TED Talk on the Falcons running backs. We just covered everybody in the Falcons backfield for you. I think you might be able to get Damian Williams for free. I think you might be able to put zero down and just get
That'd
him.
be awesome.
I think you 100% could because
And I think that could end up being like a great move for you.
Even at $1, $2,
Yeah.
Don't tell your friends about this if you want to get Damian Williams, for cheap. I think he could come back and do really well. Depending on how Tyler Algier plays, he might split some time more or less. If Tyler Algier plays well, he might earn himself some more snaps alongside Damian Williams. But I think Caleb Huntley, he's only really going to be relevant this week, assuming Damian Williams comes back on track from his injury.
Right. I could see that. So I guess we're picking up Damian Williams over Huntley then.
Yeah, well, yeah. I think you look at the upside right now. If you need a really fast plug and play, you're desperate at running back. I think Caleb Huntley, you want to pick him up obviously because Damian Williams won't be playing. So I think in that sense, Caleb Huntley has more immediate value, but Damian Williams has a chance to return on investment down the line.
Exactly, and that's why we have these indicators on here where Caleb Huntley is a short-term guy, and Damian Williams is a long-term guy. All right, at number 4, I have Mike Boone. Okay, now we got to break down this backfield now, right?
Yeah.
Like we have to make the decision now. Obviously, Melvin Gordon is rostered everywhere, and we have to make the decision now between Mike Boone and Latavius Murray, right? And this decision, by the way, if you didn't hear, Denver signed Latavius Murray off the Saints practice squad. Okay, and the way I see it is this: like this decision, can matter for the rest of the fantasy season, right? So like in the Falcons backfield, you got the next 4 weeks. Maybe Algier plays so well that he ends up, doing his thing and beating everybody out. That's possible, right? So you have that possibility, and which is why I kind of have him at number 3. That played into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
With Mike Boone and Latavius Murray, obviously I think Melvin Gordon's going to be involved until he gets hurt. So there's less of a chance that one of these guys ends up being the 1A here. But at the same time, Melvin Gordon has been fumbling like crazy, so that could play a factor into it. Latavius Murray has been available for any team to grab this entire time.
Yeah.
Right. And you know how the Ravens grabbed Kenyon Drake, right? Mm-hmm. And instantly played him over Mike Davis.
Right.
Drake was on the Raiders the entire time, right? He was not available. Right. So in that situation, then you think like, okay, maybe they grabbed him and then they're going to play him. He just wasn't available. So it's not like they had the choice. Right.
Yeah.
They chose Boone to have on their active roster as their third running back over Murray. And I do think that Boone will get a shot at being part of this rotation first before Murray. Murray looked good on Sunday morning, in relief of Mark Ingram. And he only really saw the field because Ingram got banged up. But they were going up against Minnesota, right? Minnesota Swiss cheese, right? Their run defense.
Yeah.
So he's also 32 years old. I think I'd rather take the shot on the younger, more athletic Mike Boone. I have Latavius Murray here somewhere, 14, 15, 16 somewhere. But yeah, he's like, so let me see where I have him real quick. I have him at 12. I have him at 12. So he's worth a pickup. You know what I mean? Because you never know, right? And this backfield can move up and down. Maybe they just really loved what they saw on Sunday morning. They're like, we got to have this guy. Saints fans are pissed that they didn't sign Latavius Murray to the active roster after that game. But yeah, I think I'm taking a shot on Boone, dude.
I think that's good. I think it's a good move. We talk about Latavius Murray. His role in fantasy football has been to just come in and perform decent, and that's about it. And then maybe vulture some carries from someone that we're pinning as a potential guy that could really make a difference on your team. As a waiver wire pickup. And I'm thinking I'm seeing the same scenario play out here in Denver because Mike Boone's like, oh, here's a guy he might be able to fill in. Melvin Gordon isn't playing well. Who could possibly challenge Mike Boone? Well, they bring in Latavius Murray. Clearly, I don't think they plan to not use Latavius Murray if he's there because we saw what he did on Sunday morning, and he didn't look bad at all. It might I don't think this is a depth thing. I think they're planning to kind of just ride out the storm with as many running backs as they can. Keep guys fresh, especially with Melvin Gordon underperforming and underproducing. But Mike Boone, I think, is the guy that they're going to rely on maybe in the passing game. I don't think Latavius Murray is much of a pass catcher. Melvin Gordon, he has the drops. So I think Mike Boone has the most upside in the backfield right now.
He did see 3 targets, last week, so in relief, like once, and that was all in the second half too.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. So like Mike Boone might have the receiving upside. Melvin Gordon might. I mean, now I'm talking out loud. Like who puts the guy that's dropped the ball 4 times this season as their primary running back, the guy in the ground game? So it's
Yeah.
not adding up. It's going to be tough to see how this plays out. But I like Mike Boone the most. I think Mike Boone he doesn't have any negative perception inside the Broncos organization right now. Melvin Gordon seems to be falling out of favor, and now he's just kind of thrust into the spotlight. You dropped the ball, but now Javonte Williams is out for the season. How are you going to handle this? They brought Latavius Murray in pretty fast, which tells me that maybe Melvin Gordon isn't going to be, the obvious handcuff option that we had him pinned as if anything would happen to Javonte Williams.
Yeah. Excuse me. It's a very definitely interesting situation. I think, and this is we don't want to discount Melvin Gordon. Like if you have Melvin Gordon right now, like I would be pretty happy about it. You know what I'm saying? Like this is more of a discussion between like who is the guy between Mike Boone and Latavius Murray, right? Like if you have Gordon, I'm going to start him in week 5.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? As an RB2, because he could potentially get you. He can get a ton of work. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he sees 65% of snaps next week, right? Hopefully they just he just gets the fumbles in line, and he's able to kind of get it together. I think he will. But I don't see, unless Melvin Gordon really like messes up here, I don't see these guys taking over this backfield. Does that make sense?
Right. I don't think either of them are taking over the backfield either. But I think the upside, I think Mike Boone has the ability to score, like be really efficient. He might not get many touches.
Yes.
I think it's the ability to put up some points despite maybe not having the workload that Melvin Gordon has. Like it's almost going to be like maybe a Tony Pollard and Zeke situation, where Zeke's getting the touches even though he's not that efficient, and Mike Boone,
Ooh, I like that. I like that comparison.
I think it's a fair comparison. That's
so
kind of what I envision.
Except Melvin Gordon is better than Zeke.
Yeah,
I just want to push a button. He's just I
felt that one. Let's talk about our receiver. Let's talk about our receiver next.
Let's talk about your boy Michael Gallup over here. Let's talk about the Cowboys. So he returned this week. He ran about 83% of dropbacks. He ended up scoring a touchdown. He only had 2 targets, but he's gonna get more targets. Moving forward.
Yeah.
Right. So
before we say he only had 2 targets, it should be noted, I think he drew 3 pass interference penalties on passes over 20 yards.
Wow.
So that's
one thing
to note. He did. He drew a bunch of pass interferences. If he caught 1 or 2 of those balls, we'd be having a much different discussion. So 2 targets on the box score, it's not what we saw on Sunday.
Interesting. So I'm gonna talk more about Michael Gallup and what you expect between him and Noah Brown moving forward, while I look for Michael Gallup's air yards.
Yeah. So Michael, I'm not sure if they're going to show up on the air yards because, like I said, there were technically no play on a defensive pass interference. But Michael Gallup, I expect him. He's a wide receiver too, and he might actually kind of serve as a 1A or 1B or 1A to CeeDee Lamb. They love using Michael Gallup as a deep threat. He's a big play threat, and that's what we saw. Even Cooper Rush, a quarterback, they were airing it out to him. He drew a couple pass interferences. Just if you watch, if you go to any Commanders column, they're going to be complaining about those pass interference calls because it's the same guy as William Jackson doing it multiple times. But Michael Gallup, he was their deep threat. He just didn't cash in on them because of the pass interference calls. If he reels in 1 or 2 of those instead of a 10-point performance like he had and 2 catches on 2 targets, we could be looking at 14 points, 16 points, which is a clear waiver wire pickup if he's still sitting there.
Okay.
Michael Gallup has the upside that we're looking for. He looked like Michael Gallup. He just didn't have it show up on the box score. It was just a weird occurrence.
I did find it. So he did draw 2 defensive pass interference calls combined, and then he got the two passes that he caught for 24 yards, including touchdown, thanks to Jory Epstein, who's senior NFL reporter from Yahoo Sports. So that's awesome. So yeah, no, it's looking good. So I think Michael Gallup here. Now, if you don't need a running back, if you're chilling at running back, Michael Gallup probably moves all the way up, right? Ahead of these running backs that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think
Would you say so?
Yeah, I think you could, especially with Dak Prescott coming back, because if you watch Dak Prescott play, he likes to throw for some reason to Michael Gallup more than CeeDee Lamb. But even with Cooper Rush, it's not a very pass heavy offense with Cooper Rush on the field, but still he was getting the targets, and especially like, quality targets, not like 2-yard out routes or anything like that. He was getting down the field targets. I think he could move all the way up. Yeah. I'm not sure if he's over George Pickens, because George Pickens is technically, I would say, the wide receiver 1 there. If Deontay Johnson, wide receiver 2. They're very similar in value.
Now, if I had to put some fab dollars on these running backs before we move on to 6 through 10, Raheem Mostert, I'll probably put 12 to 15% on him if I need a running back. Tyler Algier, probably capping out in 10%. Are you going higher than 10% on Algier?
I think 10 is kind of where I'm sitting. Believe it or not, in a couple of leagues, I already put 10 down on Algier. So,
all right, that's good to know. I'll put 11.
Okay, great.
Mike Boone at 4. I'm probably putting maybe $7 to $8% on Mike Boone.
Don't overpay. It might seem like an obvious ad, and you might think a lot of people are going to go crazy. Let them overspend. I wouldn't overspend on Mike Boone. There are other guys that you could pick up.
And then Michael Gallup, I might go up to 15%, just like George Pickens, because I think he could end up being, in every week wide receiver 3 with wide receiver 2 upside. So I think 10 to 15% on Michael Gallup makes sense as well if Pickens is not available in your league.
Yeah, and that very well could be. The other thing is, chances are you might have somebody who was stashing Michael Gallup, all season on the IR. Maybe I don't know. Mm-hmm. He's not necessarily the flashiest guy to hold on IR. Like you'd think he'd save that for like DeAndre Hopkins. Obviously he was suspended. But
Michael Gallup has always been disrespected on the waiver wire. Like if you notice, last year coming back off the injury, I know he's not too dependable, right? And he's been hurt a lot. Mm-hmm. So he's been. I think last year he was on my waiver wire article like every single week for like 10 weeks straight. Right. It is what it is. Even this year, it's the same thing. Despite the fact that he started, you could have stashed him on IR this entire time.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's kind of been floating around the waivers here this season too. I know because
exactly.
I've put him in, I think, this graphic a few times already.
Yeah, we have.
And he's moved up. He's moved up. So that's pretty cool.
He's moved up because he's back. He's back here and he's still not owned in most leagues, which is crazy. Right. Rachaad White at number 6 here. If you're looking at last week, both Rachaad White and Leonard Fournette got 3 carries each. He was involved from the beginning of this game. Fournette, obviously got a lot more touches, especially in the passing game, and he ended up coming through at the end of the game with that touchdown, kind of saved your fantasy day. But Rachaad White, somebody you want to, keep as a stash. Fournette hasn't been too efficient, right, this season. We love Fournette because of the fact that he's getting so much value. But, his overall, volume and snaps did come down this week. So let me look at it real quick. So Fournette ended up, he wasn't on the injury report this week, by the way, but he ended up only playing on 61% of snaps, and White played on 38%. So, we've been telling you to put Rachaad White on your bench this entire time. If he's still available in your wire, this might be your last chance to get him, right? Because if this, this could be a sign of things. It could just mean that Fournette will go back to what he used to be, but you got to have Rachaad White. Anytime you have a 3-down handcuff who's very, very talented like Rachaad White is, you got to have him on your bench, straight up.
Yeah, 100%.
He's a league winner. If Fournette were to get hurt, Rachaad White is a league winner.
Yes.
Okay. We had Caleb Huntley at number 7. I really don't want to talk about the Falcons anymore.
Yeah.
Isaiah McKenzie at number 8 here. Jamison Crowder broke his ankle. He's going to be out. He's going to be out for the season, right? That's a season-ending injury, if I'm not mistaken. I would assume it is.
I don't know if it's season-ending, but it's definitely not good news. He'll be out for the foreseeable future. I think.
I would say so.
So yeah,
I would agree that it's not good news.
Yeah.
Let's see. He's going to be out for a while. That's pretty much it. I think there were reports that he'll be out for the season.
It says he's out indefinitely, which tells you what you need to know. Especially
exactly.
At least 6 weeks, I'd say you could put there.
Now, Isaiah McKenzie, I think for the season, I think he's the pickup. However, he does have a concussion, okay? And it's possible that Isaiah McKenzie it does not play this week. And if he does not play this week, I have Khalil Shakir here at number 14, who you could potentially pick up and play this week if he doesn't play. I think Khalil Shakir ends up playing near full-time role, especially with Jay Kumaro also banged up, right? So all they're going to have is Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, and Khalil Shakir potentially as their main healthy wide receivers. And, even Gabe Davis is a little bit banged up right now. So Khalil Shakir, somebody that you want to keep an eye on. We love Khalil Shakir and his whole process coming into the NFL, and we think that he's going to be a really good NFL wide receiver. He should start out of the slot for Josh Allen this week if McKenzie can't go. But for the rest of the season, McKenzie, I would assume if he misses, he only missed 1 week. For the rest of the year, McKenzie could play a full-time role, something that we potentially saw coming, early in the year. That did not happen because Jameson Crowder actually outsnapped McKenzie before he got hurt this past week. I think it was 11-8 or something like that. But
Right.
McKenzie is somebody that you could start potentially every single week as a PPR wide receiver 3 going forward.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously the concussion clouds it a little bit, but Isaiah McKenzie, like you said, is definitely the pickup for the season. Josh Allen's looking his way, pretty consistently. He's caught a few touchdowns, which is really, what we're looking for. I wasn't sure the volume was going to be there, but it seems like he's getting enough quality targets that he's worth the pickup. I was the Gabe Davis guy. You were more Isaiah McKenzie, and it looks like you're winning the battle so far. The war is not over. I'm still holding out on Gabe Davis. Still holding out on Gabe Davis, but right now Isaiah McKenzie looks like not only just a good waiver ad, but also a good start with the Bills offense.
I mean, listen, Gabe Davis ran 42 routes this past week. Stephon Diggs ran 41 routes. Diggs got six targets on 41 routes. Davis got 3 targets on 42 routes. And McKenzie got 5 targets on 22 routes run. So when he's on the field, Josh Allen is going to be looking his way. He's an explosive, really quick twitch type of wide receiver, and he can do his thing. And he's got it into the end zone a couple times this year already. So something to keep an eye out for. And if you got him, if you already had him, it's looking pretty good for him. Don't forget about Zay Jones. He was one of the top waiver ads last week. He's still available in a bunch of leagues. He obviously did not play this past week because he popped up on the injury report late in the week. I think it was an ankle injury. He was questionable going into the week, and he ended up being inactive. But going into this week, Zay Jones was leading the Jaguars in catches over Christian Kirk coming into week 4. Christian Kirk had the fantasy points, he had the touchdowns, but Zay Jones led them in catches. So he's going to be very involved on this much improved Jaguars offense. He should be prioritized and put on your roster. If you're not going to play him, that's fine, but he should be put on rosters.
Yeah, he's the definition of a floor receiver. He has a very safe floor. He will fill in for you each week, and he has a little bit of upside. Trevor Lawrence likes looking his way. He had that one game, was it 2 weeks ago, where he put up 18 points or something like that.
Yeah.
He had 10 or 11 targets, was it? He did very well. Given the circumstance, we weren't sure what the Jaguars offense was going to look like, but it looks good so far, at least from a fantasy perspective, through the first few weeks. And Zay Jones, I actually have him on one of my benches. I picked him up because we were talking about him, as a floor receiver. If anything would happen to one of your receivers and, you're short at the position, Zay Jones will get you in and out of the week very easily.
Sal Vetri at Sal Vetri DFS on Twitter tweeted out that Zay Jones has averaged 8.9 targets over his last 8 games. And that's one of the reasons why I think, the Jaguars kind of prioritize them, in free agency. And, these guys that we made fun of the Jaguars for signing for so much money, they're actually producing for them, which is really interesting. So, we'll see how that works out. I mean, I'll say this, Doug Peterson, he's a good coach. He's a good coach. At number 10, I have Rondell Moore. Rondell Moore, he came in. He's not hurt anymore. Okay, he came in and played he ran about on every drop back. He played on the outside this game primarily. He's a slot receiver. He sucks on the outside. He cannot beat man coverage. He is a guy that should be going up against linebackers and safeties. And when he does that, though, he could potentially pick up a ton of targets. Okay, so the Greg Dortch role that we've been seeing running out of the slot, that's the role that Rondell Moore is going to be playing, and Rondell Moore is going to excel in that role, in my opinion. So they loved what they saw out of Rondell Moore this offseason. They thought that he improved a ton. They thought that his route tree was going to expand. He got hurt. We didn't see it. We still haven't seen it yet. But I think he should be, he's available on a ton of waiver wires. He didn't do his thing last week, so maybe people are going to be dropping him. So keep an eye out for that. But a lot of people don't know that he didn't run out of the slot because AJ Green was out, and they have Greg Dortch rotating into the slot. So DeAndre Hopkins is going to be back. AJ Green is going to be back, but I do feel like there are going to be some targets to go around, and I think Rondale Moore, in full PPR leagues only, can potentially be a PPR wide receiver 3. But it might take a little bit of patience. And if AJ Green is not back this week, then I might be a little hesitant to put him on my lineup. But once he is back, and we know that Rondale Moore is going to be playing in the slot, I'm happy putting him in my lineup in PPR leagues.
I'm 100% in agreement. I like Rondale Moore. I think that this week was kind of an aberration. You see that they clearly have designs to use him because Greg Dortch was just ousted pretty much by Rondale Moore coming back. Greg Dortch, he was actually a decent fantasy contributor before Rondale Moore was put back in the lineup, and now he's just on the outside. Expect Greg Dortch to continue sliding out with DeAndre Hopkins coming back and AJ Green coming back. Rondale Moore definitely has a role in this offense, and it's not one where he's going to be like targeted once or twice a game. Rondale Moore, he's going to have his games just like in any offense with this many quality receivers. That they're going to have, when they're healthy, they're going to have Marquise Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, Rondale Moore, and AJ Green. I still think AJ Green has a little bit in the tank. He can still draw a couple targets. But every receiver on this offense is going to be liable to have a good game. As this offense finds its feet, Murray looked a little bit more like Kyler Murray last week, and things seem to be trending up for the Cardinals offense. I think that we're going to see plenty of quality fantasy performances from all of these receivers moving forward.
I'm with you. All right, moving on to number 11, Josh Reynolds. We don't know if Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be out this week or not, but Josh Reynolds did his thing this week. He did his thing the week before. So, in relief of Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think you could play Josh Reynolds as like a wide receiver 3 if you need it.
100%. And Jared Goff seems to be dialed in to Josh Reynolds. They seem to have a pretty good connection. Granted, Reynolds was really the only receiver out there that Goff was looking for. He was looking for Goff was looking for TJ Hockenson a lot. But, Reynolds still got plenty of targets, and he produced. He's not anybody to sneeze at. He's actually a pretty good talent. I like Josh Reynolds here.
Yeah. Did you notice that this Lions offense, a lot of remnants of the Rams, right? Like, they brought Josh Reynolds in from LA, and Jared Goff coming from the Rams as well. So like it's very interesting to see. And now they're the highest scoring offense over the past 4 weeks. Also allowing the most points as well, which is basically what that means. This is a fantasy gold mine.
Yeah, 100%.
When your defense is allowing the most points and you are scoring the most points, that's a fantasy offense that you want to target. Hey, look where we are, man. The Lions. It's crazy.
Yeah, crazy. Recipe for success right there.
All right, so we have Latavius Murray at number 12. We talked about him a little bit already. Brian Robinson is available in about 50% of leagues. I think at this point, I didn't want to stash it unless it was in my IR spot. I didn't really want to stash Brian Robinson. You're going to have to take him out of the IR spot now because he's going to be activated off the PUP list. Now, the Commanders are going to have us from now to be able to activate him to the active roster. So to the 53-man roster. So there's a chance that Brian Robinson sits on your bench, for a while. If he does end up playing this week, if they want him in the lineup this week, then you don't have to worry about it. There's a chance that he ends up, playing an early down role with Antonio Gibson. Now, what is the upside for Brian Robinson, right? Like, what do you think the upside is, for Brian Robinson? Do you think that this can potentially be his show on early downs? Do you think Antonio Gibson goes away? Is that a possibility? How are you looking at Brian Robinson moving forward?
I think it's absolutely a possibility for Brian Robinson to be the early down guy. If J.D. McKissic could really push Antonio Gibson out last season, then I don't see why Brian Robinson couldn't. I think, Washington had designs to use Brian Robinson pretty nicely, before the whole accident happened with him and he missed all that time. Completely out of his control. I think Brian Robinson coming back is going to show that he's actually one of the better running backs in this draft class. I think the offense is kind of set up for him to excel in an early down role because the passing game hasn't been there. And if they're looking for quick yardage, first, second down, the safest way to do that is to hand off. And Brian Robinson, he's a bruiser. So I think that he'll be a nice change of pace. And I think, Brian Robinson, he could have a little bit more upside. Say maybe Carson Wentz gets benched. He hasn't been playing very well. They have Sam Howell waiting in the wings. I'd love to see what a Brian Robinson, Sam Howell duo in the backfield would look like. We saw what happened last time Washington had two rookies in the backfield at once, and that was with RG3 and Alfred Morris. And obviously, this is a completely different situation, but it could actually spell good news for Brian Robinson if there's a few changes on this offense. Because like we said, we saw what Kenny Pickett did. He actually gave the Steelers a spark. What would Sam Howell do for a Washington offense that has plenty of weapons on the outside and, Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson, a nice two-headed monster in the backfield? Faraz, I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I think from a fantasy perspective, from a football perspective, I think it's going to make a difference because Brian Robinson, could be a really good short yardage back. I think that's where his strengths are, though, and I think that's about it. I don't think he's, he can catch the ball. I don't think he's the best pass catcher. I think Antonio Gibson is going to end up staying involved as long as he's healthy. So I think the upside for Brian Robinson is a little limited unless Gibson gets hurt. So I think he's a solid stash. Keep him on your bench, but I would want to wait and see if Gibson, ends up just falling out of favor completely. I don't think that's going to happen because I actually do think that Antonio Gibson is a better player than Brian Robinson, but we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening.
Before Brian Robinson even steps on the field, we're making that call.
I do because I'm just looking at him as a prospect, right? And I looked at Brian Robinson a ton, coming into the year. I don't think anything stood out. The only thing that did stood out is that he's a monster at short yardage. So, maybe in the NFL, he ends up being a better player than he was in college, but that doesn't happen that often. So I just think that Gibson, he's a good player. I just wish that he would get more opportunity. Now, a lot of what Gibson's issues are fumbles, right? And if Gibson fumbles once or twice, it's very possible that they hand the keys to Brian Robinson on early downs. And if Brian Robinson takes that opportunity and rides with it, I think he ends up, potentially that can happen as well. So that's another opportunity for Brian Robinson to potentially take over. But yeah. Moving on to the Bills. I talked about Khalil Shakir already. Damian Williams, we talked about him already. Khalil Shakir could be a 1-week starter for you if Isaiah McKenzie is out this week. James Crowder already out, broke his ankle. Damian Williams, talked about him. He was the guy getting the snaps over Cordell Patterson early on in the year, like just for a few minutes before he ended up hurting his ribs.
Yeah.
Dude, Corey Davis, man, like 3 out of 4 weeks, 70 or more receiving yards. I think it's, if he's going to be doing this, 3 out of 4 weeks, it's time to start paying attention. Every single one of these Jets wide receivers, are in play, and Corey Davis has outperformed Elijah Moore this year, which is not something that we saw coming at all.
Right.
But he's the savvy veteran here. Both Joe Flacco and Zach Wilson have been looking for him. So at this point, if he's available, I think he should be picked up, and you could play him in your flex if you need to.
Yeah, I think that's a fair analysis. And I was going to use your exact words, the veteran savvy. That's really what a lot of young quarterbacks look for. They key in on their guys that have been there a while. Corey Davis is exactly that guy. And he's been in the Jets offense now. I think this is his 3rd year. So he knows how to operate in this offense. He's dealt with Joe Flacco. He's dealt with all the turnover at quarterback. He's a solid receiver. He's been a solid receiver. It's just he's been on a bad offense. But now this looks like the best Jets offense that we've seen in a few years. And it's good to see that Zach Wilson is actually, capable of spreading the ball out, getting the ball to his receivers. I wasn't particularly discouraged by any of the Jets receivers. They didn't really produce, but I wasn't like, oh, well, now Garrett Wilson's going to be a non-factor. No, he got 6 targets. Oh, well, Elijah Moore's going to be a non-factor. No, he had 3 catches, 53 yards. That's plenty of production for me. And Corey Davis, just kind of coming out of the wings and showing up that he's still a viable fantasy option. I like Corey Davis as a pickup here. Chances are Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson are already rostered. You could get in on the Jets receivers party and grab Corey Davis and actually, make out pretty well.
I think so. Jacoby Myers, he's likely going to get a high target share regardless of who the quarterback is. He is a little bit banged up right now. So, to keep that in mind. But he's more of a long-term guy that you kind of hold on your bench for now and see what the situation is like. With Brian Hoyer coming in, I don't love Jacoby Myers. But once Mac Jones is back, I think Jacoby Myers can be somebody that you could depend on. Now, if I see 1 week though where Brian Hoyer is targeting Jacoby Myers, which will most likely happen if Jacoby Myers is playing, then I'm cool throwing Jacoby Myers in my lineup as like a PPR flex play.
Do you think Brian Hoyer still, plays over Bailey Zappi? We saw Bailey Zappi for most of the game against the Packers, and I don't know what Brian Hoyer's status is. I think he was injured, right?
He had a concussion, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So there is a chance that Brian Hoyer ends up playing. I do think they're going to end up playing Brian Hoyer over Bailey Zappi. I think Bailey Zappi, he was okay.
I know he wasn't ranked very high. I think he was the lowest quarterback on the rookie kit. So
oh yeah, he was. I didn't think he was that good. However, they put him in extremely safe situations, right?
Yeah.
And some of his throws were pretty off. But I don't think that he's a guy that's going to end up making any wide receiver extremely relevant.
No, I hear you.
So I think they do end up throwing Brian Hoyer in there. I think he's ready. He knows his offense. If Brian Hoyer is there, I think he's definitely going to play over Zappi.
Yeah.
Tyler Conklin, another Jets receiver that you can grab still. He didn't kill it like he's been killing it over the first 3 weeks, but he still got his targets. He got decent production. If you're looking for a tight end, he's still going to be in the tight end one conversation, going forward because he's still running a route on almost every drop back. And that for tight end, that's rare. So continue to start him as a low end tight end one for now, and grab him on the waiver wire if you can.
It's funny to think there's so many low end tight end ones that we're calling. Just the way
there's not that many anymore.
Well, the way that go ahead.
Honestly, there's really not that many anymore. It's Albert O. He had one snap last week, not one route.
Yeah,
one snap. You know what I'm saying? Like it's pretty bad. If you look at the tight end landscape right now, there's not that many guys you can play. Like Pat Fryermuth, he's a low end tight end one. Gerald Everett's a low end tight end one. You got to move Kyle Pitts a low end tight end one now. He's not a main tight end one anymore, mid tight end one anymore. He's like a low end tight end one, if that.
David Njoku,
and that's about it, right?
Maybe I think that's pretty many low end tight end ones. I mean, that's just.
I mean, I would say so. 8 to 12 would be like a low end tight end one. I would say.
Yeah, I could see that.
Like those guys, pretty much it. Everyone else is just a crapshoot. Like Irv Smith, crapshoot.
How about Hayden Hurst? Is Hayden Hurst low end tight end?
I wouldn't say so. I think he's like a tight end too right now. Because I don't think he's really,
he hasn't seen the workload.
He's a crapshoot.
It's been I guess you could say that.
Yeah. I like Kenneth Walker as a pickup if he's available in your leagues. He's not available. He's available, I think, in 50% of leagues. That's what I saw. So, the reason why I like him as a stash is because we talked about yesterday the Seahawks offense just becoming a lot more fast-paced than they were. One of the most fast-paced teams in the league all of a sudden, over the 2 weeks. Pete Carroll, man, good for you, buddy. Good for you, man. Moving up with the times. Kenneth Walker, if Rashad Penny were to get hurt, and we know that he has a little bit of injury history, Kenneth Walker would hop into this offense, who's actually playing pretty well. And he would, I'm a big fan of Kenneth Walker, right, and what he did in college. So, I think he could potentially walk into that opportunity if Penny were to get hurt and do really, really, really well.
Yeah, you said Kenneth Walker's going to walk into that opportunity. I think so.
I didn't even catch that.
I think you just kind of, made it a prophecy at this point. he's going to walk into the opportunity. It very well could happen. We've seen Rashad Penny go down with injury before. Rashad Penny looked like vintage Rashad Penny, and by vintage I mean end of last season Rashad Penny last week. But the offense, it's a lot better than any of us could have really imagined.
Yeah.
I think they've been one of the surprises for fantasy football so far. They've been a pretty good fantasy offense. And Kenneth Walker, 100%. He hasn't had the volume at all, but I think you give him the volume and he can produce exactly like Rashad Penny, if not better.
I'm with you. All right, that'll do it for our tight end. Oh, I'm sorry, for our overall waiver wire rankings. Let's just hit some, some quarterbacks, streamers, tight end streamers, some defensive streamers. Carson Wentz, he's been dropped in a lot of leagues, but this is the week that you start him. You didn't want to start him the last 2 weeks against Philly, against Dallas, but against Tennessee at home, I'm starting him. He's going to be ranked in my top 12 this week. Jared Goff, somebody you need to pick up who could potentially be somebody you start every single week, right? Going up against New England. New England has not been good against quarterbacks. He's somebody that you could definitely play this week. Jameis Winston, if he's back, I'm okay playing him against Seattle. We saw what Jared Goff just did, especially if Michael Thomas is back. I think Jameis Winston could be in line to start. Even Andy Dalton, if Michael Thomas is back, even Andy Dalton could potentially, you could throw him in your lineup as well. He didn't look amazing last week, but he looked good enough where if you're desperate for a quarterback, I don't think he's a terrible streamer, especially in that matchup. Let's see. That's really about it. I mean, Marcus Mariota against Tampa, that's not ideal. And, that safe rushing floor didn't really pan out this past week because he really couldn't get anything going at all. But yeah, that's about it.
Now, floor went to the running backs in Atlanta.
Yeah, pretty much. Let me ask you a question, man. What do you think about Ryan Tannehill? Ryan Tannehill, has had some decent weeks. He doesn't have that many weapons, but somehow he's just getting it done. He has 5 touchdowns thrown in 4 weeks. Going up against Washington this week, would you stream him this week if you really need to?
I think you could stream him. Absolutely. Yeah. That's kind of been Ryan Tannehill's MO, at least for fantasy football. The past 2 seasons, I think, was it 2019 or 2020? He was actually a very good fantasy quarterback because he was running a lot more than he does now. But I think you could stream him very easily. For some reason, it's just been working out for Tennessee, the offense. I can't really explain why. Like he said, like they don't have many weapons. They have Robert Woods and they have Austin Hooper and Derrick Henry's the engine. If he could easily keep feeding it to Derrick Henry. There's enough talent for Ryan Tannehill to be a streamer. The way he's been playing too, he has a pretty safe floor. I'd be okay streaming him.
I think Geno Smith is somebody that you can pick up, and he could potentially be your quarterback for a couple of weeks. He has a tough matchup this week in New Orleans, but like we talked about with the Seahawks offense, he has the weapons. He's hyper targeting and keeping the distribution super tight between Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. And he has a couple of weapons. He's rushing the ball a little bit too. Some design rushing attempts for him, which is great. Yeah. He's going to get some rushing touchdowns as we saw last week. So 31 fantasy points this past week. He always had 2 20-point games. Week 1 and week 3. He didn't have a great game against San Francisco. That might be some like what we see this week against New Orleans. Not too bad. I think he could potentially be somebody that you start more often than not.
I'd start Geno Smith over Ryan Tannehill. I'd go as far as say that. Yeah,
I agree.
100%.
I agree. Okay, I think that'll do it for the quarterbacks. Let's take a look at some tight ends that you could potentially. Now we talked about Tyler Conklin. Obviously, he's available in a bunch of leagues. Let's see, Irv Smith against Chicago. If you have to, he did get some production last week. Did he score a touchdown last week, or did he just get the targets? Let's see. 4 targets, 3 catches, 23 yards. Not great. Nothing too crazy there. Hunter Henry is worth noting because, what's his name? Who's the other Patriots? Jonnu Smith. He ended up with an ankle injury. There's some rumors that it could be a high ankle sprain, and if it is, then Hunter Henry last week after Jonnu Smith left the game, Hunter Henry played on every single snap. He did not leave the field. They played mostly 11 personnel at that point, 3 wide receivers on the field, and he didn't leave the field. And if he doesn't, he's gonna just have some fantasy value by default. Regardless of who the quarterback is. So he's somebody, just keep an eye out for Jonnu Smith and his status, but he's somebody to look out for this week. Albert O, you can drop him if you have him. If you have him, I don't know why you still have him. Just drop him. Logan Thomas, he's going up against Tennessee. 6 targets, 5+ targets in 3 of 4 games. I think he could potentially do some things this week. With in a good matchup with Carson Wentz bouncing back potentially.
Yeah.
Evan Ingram against Houston. Ingram's running a bunch of routes. He only caught 1 ball each of the last 2 weeks, but he is, last 2 weeks, tough matchups. He could bounce back against Houston this week. And yeah, I think that's it. Hayden Hurst, you could start him. He did have a touchdown last week, but he's not getting targeted a ton. It's a good offense to be on. It could be a little bit of a shootout in Baltimore this week. So, I don't blame you if you wanted to start him.
Yeah.
Now, one tight end that I want you to keep an eye on, maybe long term, because Cameron Brate, he did end up with a concussion in this game. The dude was targeted a ton. before he got hurt by Tom
Yeah.
Brady. And this is with Chris Godwin on the field. This is with Mike Evans field. Let me just take a quick look at that. And this might be going a little bit under the radar here. But Cameron
I think it
Brate,
was
he
8
only
targets.
ran 8 targets and he only ran 20 routes. So the dude,
That's true.
so 8 targets and 20 routes is 40% target rate on his routes. So keep an eye on that because the week before he also got a bunch of targets. Okay, so I would look at him as we know that Tom Brady likes his tight ends. Cameron Brate, his route participation flew up in week 3, and he ended up with 5 catches for 52 yards. So Tom Brady's looking for him, and if you can get Tom Brady's tight end 1, why not pick him up? You might have to miss this week, but I'll stash him on my bench.
Yeah, right? I think 100%.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, some defenses that you can play. Let's see. I wrote a couple of these down. Jacksonville at home against Houston. I think Minnesota, even though their defense isn't great, I think you can start them against Chicago at home.
Yeah,
I think you can start a lot of.
If you can stop the run
Chicago.
game, you can stop the Bears.
Exactly. This Bears offense is brutal, man. I wonder how much leeway they're going to give this coaching staff and just the way that they've been playing. It's just not ideal. It's not ideal at all. Real quick, couple other defenses that you could potentially stream this week. I kind of like Indianapolis. Like, even though the defense isn't great against Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, he played well this past week, but short week. Not without his RB1.
Yeah.
I think this might be a little bit tricky for them this week. That's really it. I don't love any of these other defenses. Maybe Miami at the Jets. That could be somebody that you stream, but that's really about it.
Yeah.
That's all I got. All right, cool, guys. Take it easy. Good luck on waivers tonight. I'm going to have a Zoom call tonight with the diehards at 9 p.m. Eastern time, so we can go over some waiver wire picks. You can find my Patreon somewhere here in the description. But yeah, I'll see you guys soon. Or you can just Google Patreon, Upper Hand Fantasy. Make sure you sign up for Underdog. By the way, Underdog picks this week.
You've been on fire.
On fire. We got 7 out of 8 picks correct for Thursday night for Monday Night Football last night. We got a bunch of picks right on Sunday during the day as well. So we're looking pretty good. All right, make sure you sign up for Underdog Fantasy. We are doing so. If you do sign up with Upper Hand Fantasy, that code, you will double your deposit up to $100. So make sure you do that. Take it easy, guys. See ya. See you tomorrow. Bye. Bye.